anything to say about the deindustrialization of this country.
Georgian townhouses on the moon, the highest GDP per capita in the Milky Way. Small modular reactors under every village green. This is Anglo-futurism. Listeners, hello and welcome to the Anglo-Futurism Podcast 2026. Woo! I am here in the King Charles III space station, as always, with my, I would say, junior co-host, Tom O.
Well, it's great to be here. It's great to be promoted to co-host. Thank you, Calum.
Tom has a bag of ice on his head. He's wrapped in his greatcoat and is still
I'm
struggling.
warming myself in front of the largest open fire in lower Earth orbit.
He's struggling with the excesses that came from celebrating the triumph that we had last year. Tom, what would you say some of our great successes were?
Was it a triumph?
I would say we had a triumph.
We haven't taken back Antarctica. The globalists still hold the reins of power. I think there were some green shoots.
Some green shoots. Okay. Some potential.
So we're looking for the greenest shoots rather than, I think, the greatest military triumphs.
Okay. So this is the sort of ABBA bronze of our accomplishments. The Anglo-Futurism Gold album will be released in, what would you say, 2029?
2028.
2026.
But, I think re-enchantment went up 15%.
Sacral kingship, which was
mysticism.
our KPIs.
The base level of mysticism is rising 2% every month.
Okay. So, I mean, pal, looking at our stats, what would you say we managed to achieve?
I'm not doing the pal voice.
Do the pal voice.
You do the pal voice.
We have accomplished on our key performance metrics an increase of 23%.
No, I think it's fair to say it did get slightly out of hand last year. We did get to 12,000 monthly downloads and lots of coverage. Some good, some bad.
All good. But before we launch into our exciting get 'em all out pitch, let's go over some of our maybe more exciting and successful moments from last year before anything we say gets us kicked off out of polite society forever. Aeron, who is here in the station with us.
Hello.
He's come up. His son, the Lisan Al Gaib, is due in a couple of weeks, but he's ventured up to low Earth orbit for a little bit to grace us with his presence before he goes into full
Athelstan al-Baghdadi.
He's producing the Anglo-futurist synthesis of Islam and esoteric Twitter posting that has never yet been achieved. But the glorious Lafair Jihad will be launched in a couple of weeks with nappies, pampers, and liquefied venison fed through a bottle into this child's gullet.
Swapping the milk out for bone broth. Very important.
Aeron, go on. What would you say? What would you say were some of our highlights?
Highlights.
Aeron, what were your top 10?
Yeah, what did you like most about us?
Let's talk about your low points. No, I particularly liked the Douglas Carswell episode. I think it's the one in which you two spoke the least. Nice long stretches of just complete failure to play ball. And
as an orator or someone who inserts himself into conversations, orator Karen, you were completely mogged by Carswell.
Yeah.
I would also blame the lag in communication. That even if he was able to detect that I was sort of trying to butt in, he managed to totally ignore it.
I mean, I think the thing that listeners didn't see about that was the sort of neon sign he had behind him, right? That sort of pure Americana.
What does it say again?
Background.
Was it USA or something?
USA
Yeah.
and Mississippi.
Yeah, indeed. For a man who, supposedly still has allegiances in the UK, he's looking rather like a Yankee.
No, but in many ways, he is not a fan of the show, similar to Charles James Fox.
To the vast majority of the country.
No. But in that he is he's a deep Anglo, right? He believes that actually the Anglo values are probably better inhabited or captured or displayed by the Americans. And I mean, I was talking to someone about this, that actually, in many ways, like my insistence on using saying trousers rather than pants and all this kind of thing, like resisting Americanization. Actually, the Americans are probably like a branch off from Victorian Britain that in some ways has preserved ideas of like the Anglo values far more so than we have. We've been Europeanized.
Shall we listen to a clip?
Go on then. Pal, bring that up.
One of the other parts of Milestones that stood out was the part on immigration and specifically remigration, which is not a word that people will have heard very often up till fairly recently. Could you give us an idea of how important you think that part of Milestones is relative to the rest?
I'm talking to you from the United States, and I think there is something rather wonderful about people, and I mentioned Elon Musk earlier, moving to a different country and making a success of it. And there are some benefits to that kind of migration. But that is the exception these days, I'm afraid. Most migration into Europe are not doctors and engineers and future Elon Musks coming in. Often they are people who are essentially welfare dependent, often very, very low skilled, coming in from low human capital societies, bringing with them the values that make those societies low human capital, unwilling to assimilate or integrate, with poor time preferences, impulsive behavior, and a high propensity to live on welfare and commit crime. And this is not just me saying this, the data says it. If you look at data from Denmark and the Netherlands, you have this extraordinary analysis done in the Netherlands where they show the net fiscal contribution made by migrants from different backgrounds. Migrants from the Anglosphere and to some extent East Asia are a huge benefit to the Netherlands. Migrants from other European countries are a benefit, not a huge benefit, but a benefit to the Netherlands. Migrants from Muslim-majority countries are at no point in their lives net contributors to the economy or the exchequer in the Netherlands.
It's an interesting one, actually, because on that topic of the Anglo values, America has probably experienced far greater change, right? In that it's the number of people coming from Latin America, East Asian, despite the fact that they are maybe economically successful. People say that the thing they hate about tech culture in San Francisco is that these are like East Asian status games that turn everything into like a grind set. Oh, my founding engineer is vibe coding in the airport lounge.
Oh, I saw one today. It was like someone boasting that in the restaurant the waitress had helped them use the right Claude model. Yeah, it was so cringeworthy. So these people have never heard of sprezzatura. It's embarrassing.
Go on, Tom.
You know what sprezzatura is?
I don't think I do.
Sprezzatura is it's something that I embody, which is effortless excellence. Like this is the thing that the Elizabethans would strive towards exhibiting. Right? Oh, this little Petrarchan sonnet that I just knocked out in my feet on the way to see you, like on the way to your prodigy house, like that kind of thing.
Surely Calum has embodied this better by not knowing what it means.
Right?
Like you're already a bit of striver if you know what sprezzatura.
No. I don't know where I picked it up, but I'm au fait with the vocab.
Yeah. Although I would say I'm quite a striver class, and that I
know we're day school boys.
We're day school boys. Yeah,
we are fundamentally strivers.
We don't have the relaxed, laid back attitude that a true border would have.
We got in some shit for that Carswell episode, as you boys might remember. with our shaming by hope not hate. But I take my hat off to Carswell, really, because he's copped a lot more flack than us for saying things which, as he says, should not be controversial.
Yeah, although let's be honest, I think his great triumph was the detail that he went into.
Yeah.
Right. Milestones is like a meaningful and exciting essay, and I think the reason we want to talk about it
And it's not hateful, it's not horrible, it's just very pragmatic.
Well, but the stuff about this exact changes that would be needed to Constitutional and Governance Reform Act 2010,
Orders in Council.
Orders in Council, exactly, to deliver an actual rollback of, what people have variously called like UK Blairite consensus, stakeholder government, and have a country that can respond flexibly to the actual whims of its people. Lawrence Newport probably sits on the other side of the Carswell coin. Tom, how would you characterise Lawrence's trajectory last year?
Lawrence's trajectory? Well, I think people tend to find their peak when they come on the Anglo-Futurism podcast, which he did in January.
So government is just like filled with inertia. They just don't want to do anything. And the real problem is that which is really something which I learned. It was kind of like a radicalizing moment. Like I can show you the graph. I can show you how much damage these things are doing. I can show you that they basically should be a banned breed already. It's only because they have tripled in size that there's kind of a loophole. They don't look anything. Well, they do still look alike, the pit bulls, but they're much, much larger.
I think what's been very striking about Lawrence is he had a very successful campaign in this first case, and now LFG then has like grown and grown and grown, but they've now slightly, I don't know about topped out, whether calling the market like that is a dangerous thing to do, but what is the like next trajectory for them, and what could produce what does an LFG-driven change now look like?
I think it's hard to say from the outside. There are lots of influences on, the order in which government tries to put bills through Parliament, for instance, or the way that they write those bills. So it's difficult to really attribute blame or praise to an individual party. Success might look like, there's this these ideas about planning coming from the government, making it into law faster and with more radicalism than they might otherwise. Like we might never know the influence. It sounds like a kind of cop-out, but there's never going to be an LFG bill. I think there are some good indicators of people listening to LFG, like the number of politicians who want to be associated with them and who are basically a sort of soft form of elite defector. They're saying, fuck it, like we should streamline. We should streamline the building of infrastructure. Maybe they're saying things like we should leave the ECHR or like get out of the Aarhus Convention.
But these are now like accepted. Accepted.
Yeah, but
statements.
how they become accepted? Not necessarily because of LFG per se, but groups and people like LFG just continuing to persuade people in positions of influence.
No, because if you've got like a vision of I have a vision of what I want the country to look like, should I follow the LFG model, or has there been a different group of people who has produced this like set of changes, right? Like the fact that we get planning reform now, can that be attributed to LFG? I mean,
my point is that it can't.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about like the Alex Karp book, the Technological Republic, and about how he's coming in very late and aligning himself with what is now consensus, right? That there has been growing consensus about it, but the fact that
I think it's a superficial consensus. I can easily see Silicon Valley flipping if the Dems look like they're going to win the next presidential election.
Sorry, I meant more in Britain about this growing consensus of planning needs to be fixed, energy needs to be fixed, the civil service needs to be reformed. That despite the fact that you have this consensus, the fact that you're not getting like dramatic, internal reassessment and change in direction suggests that the model of like get a few charismatic people up on stage, get them to say the right thing, have the right values isn't enough. That you need like some extra level of organizational and institutional campaigning ability or lobbying ability that actually can produce change. So I think that is my read on this. That LFG should be seen.
Oh, come on, Lawrence, haven't saved Britain yet. What, sitting around with your dick in your hands. Come on,
You had all year.
I think this is unfair, Calum.
Maybe, but like, okay, taking one step further, you're Lawrence Newport. What do you do now?
Sitting in silence because fixing Britain is a difficult problem.
Sure, but
I mean,
what is?
I
but
would
what is
probably set up a podcast.
But what is the shape of the institution that you produce that will have the maximum impact, like in terms of return on investment or return on like man hours put in, that would meaningfully alter the direction of Britain?
Well, Lawrence puts forward a kind of negative theory in that clip, right, where he says specifically you could show the decision makers these graphs and, you know, give a very straightforward empirical argument, but it simply doesn't go in. You think clearly you can explain a lot of LFG's year in terms of that lesson, that yes, you know, we're all very wonkish here and we understand the data, but you need to do that air war and you need to have a show of force and have your lovely event at the O2 in order to get any change. But it seems to me that maybe that runs a course eventually, right? Like, is it really sustainable to continue campaigning without that underpinning of data? Or do you end up making the same institutional failures by prioritizing, hiring and optimizing for people who can do the charismatic convincing?
So you're saying that once you've got the data there, they have got the data, they've shown it, and they now believe that the fight is largely in selling the data.
I mean, that's what he seems to be saying in that clip, right? That it just wasn't enough. You know, the sort of naive theory of politics where you give a bunch of MPs a presentation and they go, yes, well, you've proven something, therefore we will do the right thing. You know, so-called evidence-based policy. Real evidence-based policy has never been tried.
Yeah.
He also talked about sort of dinner party theory of politics, whereby because our current range of legislators is kind of supine and not very intellectual, they're strongly affected by what other people in these sort of elite milieu think. So they don't want to enact any legislation that will make them look bad at a dinner party, for instance. So Lawrence did argue when he was speaking to us that part of effecting change in this country, given that we're kind of lumped with this elite milieu, the important thing is that they feel that there's sort of intellectual and moral cover for them to do the difficult but necessary things for the country to be fixed.
But in that case, he was very coy, right? He was very coy, and LFG have been very careful not to step out of line or say something that might upset people, which suggests.
Well, they're not dangerous intellectuals.
They're not dangerous intellectuals.
You get that? Oh yeah, no.
Oh.
They're neither dangerous nor. Anyway.
Sorry, that was a reference to our Hope Not Hate report.
So okay,
we don't bring it up much.
But I'm going to go back round to that question about the institution, because if you think that it's purely a dinner party game, your challenge should be: can you get into every single dinner party? Is that a meaningful model of change? Like, could you have someone who was so charming and charismatic that they could just be brought round, you know, from dinner party to dinner party? I mean, you know, I volunteer as tribute,
Yeah.
but and convince people. Is that actually how change
No, I think
happens?
it's about ideas are in circulation, and it helps if the right people talk about them, I suppose.
You know, clearly the people at Bismarck have been pushing forward a very specific theory of institutions where, you know, great founders are required. And, you know, the dinner party model seems very much to me the reason why our politics has gone a certain way. And I don't personally think that you can just replace the dinner party ideas with new and better ones. I think the dinner party ends up being a sort of filtering and molding process for those ideas. And so however good the input was the thing that comes out is so much worse and is basically the same as the old thing.
Any idea brought in after the starters will be rendered like unrecognizable by pudding.
Because it's a consensus-seeking process, right? And I think there's clearly something to the idea that an end to consensus-seeking is maybe somewhat necessary for the large-scale changes in the country to happen, because any process which ends up with a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people who are, more interested in covering their backs than moving something forwards and in advancing in the institutions rather than doing something for the greater good. I think the more you have that, the more median the outcomes will be. And median outcomes have been the thing which has driven us into decline.
I think the consensus-seeking behavior is what you do if you feel insecure, right? Insecure in your position. And in order to protect your position, you don't want to appear too out
Wait,
of
no,
line.
I can see it coming from a mile off. You're arguing for a better than
aristocracy.
aristocracy.
No,
I know exactly what you're doing.
What I was actually going to do is I was going to bring up Bazball. So I'm going to return to my conversation about Bazball. But by bringing it through a person, Tom, I know close to your heart, Philip Cunliffe.
A great man.
A great man who's talked about this idea of power-generating mechanisms in the state, that the ability of a state to actually join itself into a sort of sphere and target a goal.
So if we're forced to consider what binds us together as an island nation, which means, an island nation in the North Atlantic, offshore of Europe, we need to think seriously and hard about what our collective interests are, materially, politically, legally. What is the things that we share as a new country emerging? And it seems to me in that context, there's everything to play for. And if I may, I suppose my pitch is that the Anglo-Futurist project to unlock all the the wonderful kind of infrastructural projects, the new technologies to take advantage of Britain's whatever comparative advantage it may have in fields such as AI or what have you, that requires a state that has buy-in on every level from its citizen. From its citizen body, we need to unlock sovereignty as a power-generating mechanism in terms of getting legitimacy from the people that comprise the sovereign state. And if we can unlock that source of power, then it can lead to tremendous achievements collectively, nationally. And so my hope is the national interest can do that. But it requires us, it was a long process of creating a new national identity, in effect.
So my argument here about Bazball, Tom, is despite the recent Ashes washout,
it's not over yet.
It's not over yet. But I would argue that if you have a group of people who always feel like they can be kicked out, that they are vulnerable because the structures of power are so diffuse that if you deviate too much from a consensus, you can be basically removed. So when power is diffuse, there is a need to be strictly in line with consensus. However, when given the confidence that even after a disastrous display of batting, as displayed by many of our finest who went down under, that they will not be kicked out of the team immediately, you give people the confidence to act in ways that are like more outside the distribution. If people feel that when they say something that is like outside of what can be said between the prawn cocktail and the panna cotta, then you are then people are more willing to say things that are like daring and the sort of necessary statements of like conviction, i.e. not a committee thinking, but rather an individual saying, I want to achieve this and everyone had better fall in line behind me. And that's what you need if you want to like invest a lot in AI or whatever. You need to not be just sort of everything ismed out of like any kind of strong statement of intent or purpose.
Right, so the Bazball point is about freedom of speech.
The Bazball point was largely secondary, and has not been held up. And obviously, Brendan McCullum needs to be removed, exiled, actually sent to Australia where he can do harm there. But the point, I think, stands.
No, I think it's. I think this is a year where I suspect Cunliffe thought will be vindicated, insofar as, even as we speak, Maduro, the president of Venezuela, has been captured by the US, which is an extraordinary act of interference. Spheres of influence are back.
But that's
the
for the
national
US.
interest is
But
back.
that's for the US. We in a sphere of influence, there is the sphere owner and the spheree, and we clearly sit in spheree terms. That there was a I've just finished.
Well, indeed, we're surrendering the Chagos Islands to the Chinese ally of Mauritius. So we're very much respecting this sphere of influence doctrine. We just don't have a sphere anymore.
Was that a sort of Straussian call for Trump to turn his attention to Starmer as the next kidnapping?
Actually, the finest thing that Trump could do to preserve the West is kidnap various European leaders and get them so angry and het up that investments in Rheinmetall will come good 400% up.
No financial interest
No
declared.
no financial interest declared. No, you're right. My investments in BAE Systems actually then crash because we decide to sell them off.
Do you not think your point about free speech is always in tension with what Cunliffe says about national purpose? That if everyone's going in different directions at the dinner party, it's very hard actually to have a consensus about what to do.
But if there's only one dinner party, that you can actually, and everyone knows everyone, and you know all the players in the game. If someone loses this round, at the next dinner party they might win the next one. I think the problem is when ideas and people become too separated, because if a person is too associated with an idea and an idea loses, then it feels like it's you out along with your idea. Whilst if a person has security in the Westminster system or up wherever, and they can afford to have like multiple goes round, you might have lost the battle, but you might win the war, kind of thing.
What do you think we could do to change that, though? How can you create this culture of bravery around what you say?
Well, I mean, there's an obvious answer here. But no, I mean, the actual answer is you need a much smaller political class, because everyone has to know everyone, which I suppose leads us inexorably back round to aristocracy. No, but actually, there are ways you can achieve this, like in the French model, right? The French model where everyone goes to the same, like, I can't remember what it's called, like the Polytechnique of sort of statesmanship and management or whatever. Like, by forcing everyone through an incredibly narrow
But that is going to
process.
get captured by bureaucratic groupthink, of the kind that's destroying Western governance.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Well, and
I think
that's
it's
the people who go there are just totally insulated from needing the approval of their peers in the middle class.
well.
Actually,
So I think
they're no longer in
that
the
is
middle class.
that is actually possibly the point. The damage
So
is
if you
not
actually send genuine aristocrats who are assured of their aristocratic status,
Yeah.
and the aristocratic status of their descendants for many generations to come,
The problem-
then we will free ourselves from middle class bureaucratic
the
groupthink.
problem with the dinner party problem is not that there are dinner parties. The problem is that they invite their friends who went to Bristol, and in doing so, they expose.
They should invite their friends who went to St Andrews.
No, none of those. If you were not a Balliol man, you're not a Balliol man, and I look at two near hopers opposite me, who respectively were
I was next door.
New and St John's.
Yeah.
Sorry, no luck. Play again next time.
I fear that Balliol is not the aristocratic citadel that you like to believe it is.
Well, as a person who attended a polytechnic, of course, I would never dare to challenge my betters.
You're tugging your forelock in entirely the wrong direction.
But I think and I don't think this is actually possible, though. I think actually, if we're going to be realistic and sort of Bismarckian about this, we have a much more diffused source of membership of the political class. They're going to have dinner parties. they're going to repeat ideas that come to them from Twitter.
Maybe we just ban dinner parties.
Neutraloaf only. No, but I was going to say the answer probably is then you have to win the ground war. You have to convince like the rest is politics class that this is how things should be, and the best way of doing that, a BBC, a limited series on the BBC.
Do you think there's something significant about COVID and all of this in that it did ban dinner parties for a while? And in some sense, that period was the great sort of political unlocking for a lot of people. And there were a greater variety of viewpoints suddenly espoused, with people locked at home, some would say being radicalized, but perhaps away from the social feedback of regular meetups with friends, sort of gently moderating anything they might be thinking.
Yeah, I think it introduced some accelerationism of the current model. That's for sure.
I think it's a very interesting, and also if you look at the behaviour of government, it was far more extreme than anything that had preceded it or ever since, right? Because, as you say, if you're locked up with only people you're working with, I wonder. I mean, I suppose that's the big litmus test of your idea. Did it work? Maybe if the ideas are bad, it sort of doesn't matter if your people are insulated. The king has bad advisors. But you could feasibly replace them, and get a better cohort. Did I have better ideas after COVID? Probably not, because there's clearly clearly it entrenched or supported people who already had existing social networks that were more powerful, and the like genuine grassroots or sort of small little platoons that we would hope would form sources of like political legitimacy couldn't form. So I would say yes in direction, but in like whether it actually produced the desired outcome is a no. What would if elites were going to come to, like if people were going to come to Britain, is that inexorably linked to like military power or economic power? Is there a world? I mean, Cummings or someone has talked about the idea that Britain could be the kind of school of the world. That still still feels like a vassal position. Like, what would it take for our values to be broadcast in the way that he described? Because like Macron talks about strategic autonomy, no one is really learning French, despite the fact they've got superior energy autonomy, they've got nuclear weapons. Like, what would it take for us to be?
Yeah, I think
that?
Autonomy is probably slightly overrated and indispensability is underrated. So France is autonomous in energy, but it doesn't have bargaining chips. That just means that it's kind of it's harder for Russia to manipulate France. That's basically what it means when France is energy autonomous. But if France becomes indispensable to something like AI or robotics, then it has much more power to implement its will on the rest of the world.
Well, and manipulate Russia back, right?
So I mean, look at somewhere like Taiwan. They've got TSMC. That does actually give them a massive bargaining chip, right? Or look at the Netherlands. Similarly with lithography. That's indispensability rather than autonomy. Like the Netherlands don't need to be. They should be energy autonomous. They're not, but they don't need to be.
Okay, so at the moment, we don't necessarily have one of those. Is there one that sort of we could capture? Because I mean,
biotechnology, right? Maybe we become the best place in the world to do gene editing, or the best place in the world to develop industrial robotics. It could happen. It's probably China at the moment.
I mean, China. Yeah, I mean, I was on a call the other week. People talking about like China's automated lab development. They've just ploughed a vast amount of money. They've got set up like 80 automated labs around the country doing like materials development and chemistry specifically.
But this is partly because the CCP, says every 5 years we're going to implement certain things economically, and in a long-term strategic sense, one of their hallmarks is that they identify sectors that they think are going to be big. So electric vehicles being one of them. They also identified early on that critical minerals would be a big deal as robotics expanded in importance. So this is actually something that a government can do. If you, I know nobody likes picking winners, but this is a form of picking winners, and it can work.
Do we have a good understanding of how the Chinese did it? Because they didn't necessarily say that one company was going to win, right? They sort of backed 2 or 3 possibilities, and then people call it like a venture capitalist state, that you basically allow a few companies to have a go, and the one that does well, you then throw a whole load of support into. Like that takes you beyond the sort of old trope of national champion into something a bit more modern. Photonics is one of those interesting things. I was chatting to an engineer at Flux, which is the James Dacom company, trying to do purely optical matrix multiplications. I think the frustrating thing that he said was that they were struggling to hire people or get people who understand optics. I mean, optics is like one of these fields that is both incredibly modern and also bizarrely archaic, right? Like the last person I could really think of who did optics was Newton. But if anyone's an optics engineer out there, go and apply to Flux. But that would be a classic example of could we throw a whole load of weight behind and capture that vertical and say that we've already got ARM. ARM exists in pretty much every smartphone around the world. What would it look like for us to produce a comparable advantage or leverage in a different field?
Well, maybe we pick what we think might be the next winner, or we pick a bunch of them. Organoids.
Go on, tell us about organoids.
Well, the idea of organoids is that you can use a biological substrate for computation. Famously, you and I use a biological substrate for computation. And I mean, your inputs are like oxygen and like instant noodles and stuff like that, and like out comes a passable robotic startup. And so I think there's a good chance that the way that we do computation, the specific kind of silicon substrates on which we run it, is maybe not necessarily the most physically optimal one in the long term.
Have you seen that Beth Bezos finally shipped, and the sort of thermodynamic computer chip that he was shouting about?
Aren't all computers thermodynamic?
So his one is based on this thing called p bits. So people were Slap's hood. This can do so many thermodynamic computations. Look under the hood. It's just p bits. It also has the absolute lamest package. Have you seen it? It looks like a gem or an item from a Legend of Zelda game. It's like a seven-sided gold, 3D printed gold case with bizarre lattice work and fake writing on it.
I mean, it's a feature of, I think, the American startup scene, certainly in hard tech, that the gamers are in control.
Yeah.
Right, like Palmer Luckey as well is another big feature of this. I mean, maybe we do this in the UK, right? The sort of games workshop contingent, right? Become our sort of next industrialists.
I mean, I like the idea of the heavy bolter. The mounted on a rhino people carrier, and an assault team with chainsaws coming in. That doesn't sound too bad for me. It's definitely less lame than the sort of Atari style. Kind of, you've got a new item kind of aesthetics of that crowd.
On the organoids, though, are you thinking we would source them, I guess, through the NHS, right? I mean, that's our big strategic advantage. So, for organoids, you need stem cells, right? And you probably need some donation there. But are you seeing a route here where the NHS, through its access to biological tissue, is able to, in some sense, become a biological chip company?
Is that the bottleneck on organoids at the moment? I simply don't know.
I mean, no. The bottleneck really with organoids is that they are currently not very impressive, and they're very early stage. People have been able to.
I think I've seen one playing Pong.
Yeah, exactly. The Pong paper was lovely.
No, I actually saw it in person.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's a great UK success that. I imagine pure organoids will not be what it looks like. You know, in some sort of science fiction sense, you want this kind of biosilicon hybrid, right? You know, potentially these organoids act as some amount of kind of energy efficient glue between the other chips.
Well, I mean, Aeron, you sent me that paper about the Bayesian electronics, which has now sent me down something of a rabbit hole. That I think Aeron on the sort of Christmas Eve or something sends me a paper. Oh yeah, big deal, Calum. You know, read this now, which was on people developing electronics that could express, or you could sample from to programmable distributions. So if you're doing any kind of Bayesian calculations or sort of active inference or probabilistic computing, the ability to have a programmable distribution is like a very useful thing. I mean, that would be an example, surely, if you can, you know, find specific calls that previously would have gone to like a slow peripheral, and that you can actually replace with a more elegant or nicer component. I have to say, though, as someone who works largely with like microbes, and people have always talked about biosensors, which are kind of little bottles of bacteria that'll glow red if they're near lead or something. The idea has always been nice, but the idea that you might have to, rather than plugging in your phone, you have to, I don't know, feed it a bit of sugar every now and then and shake it up. I think I've always felt as, and then in response it gurgles at you and smells bad, has always felt like quite a bad UX to me.
Yeah, but you can imagine the story, right, where the UK, because we're so energy constrained, we have to do these kind of like cheap, scrappy things. And there's a little bit more pressure to do that kind of thing, like edge compute, low energy chips, whatever.
Yeah.
I think the thing with that is it's very hard to then scale into the kind of size of company that would need to be a major player.
Or cloud in other fields, right? My argument is that biological cloud, like experiments or cloud experiments, have to take place because you can't run all of these things manually. And I think also Britain is particularly well suited given how dense it is, right? When you actually have to move, I was talking to a guy in San Francisco whose vision for this was that it's like a very clean data in, data out model where you send in the sequence of the plasmid that you want transformed into the strain, as in, so you would send strain, plasmid sequence, and those are actually assembled at the laboratory, tested, and then the data is sent back. So there's actually never any need to do like actual manual handover of samples. So which means you don't have any problems of like transporting GMOs across borders or even like across the country. I think it's a very interesting idea. I wonder to what it, like, obviously there's a real like power law distribution on these things whereby E. coli are very easy to modify because you know how to do it. And as you go down that like curve towards strains that are less familiar and less nice to work with, the returns to doing it and like offering that as a service becomes smaller and smaller. So whether actually being in a country that is small and is like incredibly concentrated, right, where you could actually get a sample shipped anywhere in the country in under 24 hours easily, you know, by just sending a van. Or if you set up a facility, you know, in Milton Keynes, you get the southeast, you know, in between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and you get Scotland, like, and you actually, with very low capital investment, you get access to basically the whole of the country. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think people often talk about, you know, why would we bother building up industries in the UK? You know, everyone else does it cheaper and better. But I suspect, and I haven't run the numbers on this, as you say, making more use of that very dense island geography lowers a lot of the sort of transportation cost, friction, even the risk, right, of losing access to a supplier who's abroad, which is very underaccounted for. And we could have much more productive industries, as we used to, right? I mean, the sort of canalways, you know, the ability to sort of sail around the country very quickly and sort of deliver things from one end to another, I think was a huge part of Britain's growth during the Industrial Revolution. And it's strange that we've walked away from that.
Yeah, I mean, natural harbours, right? Natural harbours is the real bounty that allows a country to develop. And this is actually a similar form of, Poole Harbour. Now, modern Poole Harbour is a dense road network.
Yeah. Yeah, forget growing London. Let's grow the Thames.
Or grow the North
extend
Sea.
it,
Or grow the North Sea.
Wait, so Duncan is saying concrete over the Thames. You're saying make it twice
Duncan's
as
saying
wide.
concrete over the Thames.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Explain.
because the the price of land is so high in central London that if we could just magic up, say it's 300 meters wide, and it goes
300 meters?
or whatever it is. Maybe it's like 100 meters. I don't know. This mighty river in the heart of London. Imagine that that area of central London was suddenly available for the housing market.
I mean, we used to do this with
basically the argument.
The man is a one-hit wonder, isn't he? He discovered land reclamation once and is now when you are an aircraft carrier style dredger and sand sprayer, every problem looks like sea to reclaim.
He's a paperclip maximizer.
Yeah.
But were you going to bring up London Bridge?
Yeah, exactly. Like we had housing on London Bridge and all of this, right?
We could do a few London bridges.
Seems good, but you're saying why just stop at the bridge, right? That's
that's
very out of the box.
Why not make
thinking.
the whole thing an underground river?
Yeah.
Well, there've been places where they've actually replaced canals with cycle paths, so you can like cycle through a town, and you'll go under all the little bridges with tow paths on either side, but it's actually now a cycleway. I also think, not to bring this back to my hero, but Bazalget's purchasing of all the private bridges, widening them and making them toll-free, had a big impact because it allowed a whole lot of development to happen south of the river. There's also a lot of benefit there in connecting, a much maligned part of Britain that Tom and I have been known to be found.
We're economic refugees from North London.
I was watching a short YouTube video recently about the Greenwich Foot Tunnel, as I often do, as a Greenwich local. But a huge part of that story was, it was one of these great sort of public works ideas. It was built from the start with the idea that this would always remain free, and it was to allow commuters from South London to commute into North London. So obviously there's a lot of dockyards work going off at the time. And you're right with your mic. So there was a lot of dockyards work available at the time. But, a huge part of this story was anyone who was sort of coming from the south of the river, they'd maybe take the ferry or like do the sort of hours-long walk to one of the other bridges, apparently experienced, severe discrimination as a South Londoner. Absolutely not. We don't like your sort here.
Bank walker.
Yeah.
Banker. Well, I mean, if we're going to take this metaphor further, that surely the comparison now is like HS2 and the growing of London, right? That the much maligned commuter town, home county's commuter town resident should be welcomed in and treated as part of a greater London.
Yeah. Well, even with the Elizabeth line, right? I've been out to the sort of western reaches of that recently and seeing sort of developments happening around the stations now, where there's a bunch of co-working spaces and sort of trendy modern things you might see in sort of Liverpool Street, now happening in places which I think, 10 years ago I thought of as the countryside practically, right? Clearly we should do more of this. London can just get bigger.
I mean, there's that time lapse of the size of London that I think is always enjoyable to watch, and you see how you move rapidly from, well, not that rapidly, right? The city, and then you get fairly little growth until then. The Victorians massively expand, and obviously in Our Mutual Friend by Dickens, I can't remember the bugger, I can't remember the name of the family, but they live in Soho, and that is felt to be so in the sticks that they are right by fields, and they sort of they're so embarrassing how far he has to walk to get into his job in the city.
Yeah, it does make me think, though, Shiv Malik and his Forest City, of course we support this. It's a wonderful aim, but really we just support that being London, right?
It's just a suburb.
He won't get the chance to build it. We're going to expand before he gets there.
I'm not in favour of expanding London very aggressively. I'm more in favour of densification.
But I think
tasteful, gentle density.
I think though this is
Speaking as the resident aesthete.
well. I think this is if we were to return to the abattoir and our sacred cows.
I thought you were referring to Brixton then.
This feels like a good opportunity to say, but maybe you don't get that choice, Tom.
Hang on.
Very good.
He's
very
got
good.
it queued up.
Yeah.
No. I just know the website.
This is
All
my
right, let's
first
hear it.
time seeing the website. I didn't realise there was there's so many cow
Producer's
sounds.
worst night. We've got a Polish cow dance meme.
Yeah. I'm sure this is hilarious in Polish.
Cartoon cowbell. I mean, yeah. I don't like Nugget Cowboy. Okay, one more. All right. Back on track.
I mean, on the density point, I am, as you know, a great fan of sort of old European capitals, and the tasteful, sort of gentle density there is unbelievable. The core part of that is the wide streets, right? Like you have these wonderful kind of wide roads where the density works as a result because you fill the space of the street. So, the great boulevards in sort of Paris or Vienna or Budapest or something like this. I think a lot of London roads, inherently, they're quite narrow and windy.
No, that's fine if they're Victorian mansion blocks.
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's
on like Tite Street, for instance, it almost by name, it is a narrow street, and that's fine. If you have the right architecture and you set it back as you go up story to story, it can look very, very nice.
Yeah, but let's be honest about this. Like, I agree in principle, and I think you can do it on narrow streets. We were all in Budapest recently, and actually there are plenty of narrow streets there, but the houses just come right up to the pavement, and then they immediately go up high, and it feels, as you say, you feel like you are in a real city rather than it feeling like an urban canyon or urban valley in the way that you might if you're in amongst those new skyscrapers in Vauxhall or around the Tate.
I mean, a lot of those narrow streets are effectively pedestrianised, right? They're sort of back streets where a car might come if it really needs to, whereas a lot of fairly main roads in London are quite narrow.
Yeah.
Okay. I think around Greenwich, right? We have it's a huge thoroughfare for a bunch of places in southeast London, and it's barely 2 cars wide.
But I think to go back to Tom's point, have Tom with your recent Damascene conversion to NIMBYism. The scales fell from my eyes and the planning applications replaced them.
TCPA is the greatest piece of legislation ever written.
But it is much more coercive to force people, like it would require sort of compulsory purchase, a far greater disruption to people's lives. I know we have flirted with the idea of like win-wins, that we're not on the Pareto efficient frontier, but clearly it is simpler to build houses on greenfield rather than brownfield. Like, if we're going to talk about efficient return on investment, Moloch and the market demands efficiency, and a friend of mine put it very well, like culture and market efficiency are often at odds, and people who prioritize culture are often then left behind because the culture that they want emerged out of a specific set of economic circumstances. It seems to me that we have to choose the economic model, which is then expanding in greenfield outside of London, because prioritizing abstract cultural goals in sort of loose, non-market driven way leads to inefficiencies that then we might as well be hammering screws into washing machines to meet Soviet quotas kind of thing.
I think this might be a nice point at which to bring up our Alex Burkhardt interview, which is one of my favourites, because he too talks about this tension between modernity and progress. I want to play what he said about this Anglo-Saxon concept called weird.
So the Anglo-Saxons had this concept called WYRD, WYRD, which is a very complex idea, which is a sort of fatalism connected to one's past and future, and the need to be brave in the face of facing up to your fate. And actually, we need some sort of weird wide web that connects us with with the great and terrible tales of old and the experiences of our country folk, and that means that the English and the British past is fundamental to the way in which we plan for the English and British future.
I think if you carpet over the Greenbelt with hideous housing that says nothing about this country, and you fill it with Keir waivers, what's the point?
I agree with that, but I still think that people said similar things about like the slum buildings of East London, of like the urban towns that sprung up around factories, and yet now clearly those were felt to be like the places that the urban working class like emerged from. That I agree it doesn't work if you've imported people who can't have access to a sort of shared sense of history. I wonder now, to be honest, even if you were to like pause all migration whatsoever, like international communications make forming that kind of cohesive narrative about oneself much, much more difficult, because you're always in dialogue with other countries and other traditions. But clearly culture does emerge out of these places, and I think there is a like negative Luddite attitude that suggests that culture only comes out of past forms. Change and circumstance produces its own forms of like expression and relationship. Frankly, there is a hinge culture, like this despised way that people meet. There are like complicated ways that people signal who they are, how they relate, what they, who they might want to meet. It's still shallow and it's still kind of gross, but it's still a form of culture. Like it emerges out of how people just relate to each other. So I think we just have to say, let's build new towns or new places for us all to live, technologies, whatever. And the culture will follow. And as long as you kind of keep half a mind to producing something that people might want, people are people. People want to talk to each other, spend time, innovate, come up with ways of like meeting that are impossible to plan for.
Yeah, culture will happen one way or another.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I think you have to actively preserve some parts of culture.
So perhaps to distinguish, I mean, there's a sense there of, in some sense, high culture and a preferred culture, which I agree, right? That has to be preserved. It's actively participated in. One of the things we've sort of seen recently is that style of culture has been in decline, or at least it's ceased to sort of onboard new people, is the emergence of many other cultures. I think, if you look around Britain today, I think it's a very narrow view to say that there isn't culture. There are many cultures, some of which, people find quite alienating, some of which people look at and think maybe they are destructive in some way or opposed to the national purpose. But I think, to Calum's point, those cultures authentically reflect the context that they've kind of, been brought up in, and the forms that they're given to express. There's the recent call, right, from Tyler Cowen and Patrick Collison of Stripe for a new aesthetics, which, is really a call for a revitalization of culture. And I think it's interesting how narrowly they focus on, they talk about the visual arts as the key medium of this. In some sense, that's a very reactionary and I would even say outmoded view of where culture is. They reference the Bauhaus in their essay calling for these submissions. What the Bauhaus did was to find culture in many cases in industrial process and design. The fact we have, an iPhone as a cultural object, as a work of art, is directly traceable to the Bauhaus. And the kind of constant looking back to forms of culture which, no longer make sense economically, right? The need to gather together to say, go to the opera, right, it's slightly been undermined by the birth of streaming, right? So you can always have these rich cultures and you can always find things to preserve. But I think to Calum's point, the culture will happen anyway, one way or another.
No, it will. But we make choices as a society. So
that's the economics, right?
History lesson. No. History lessons in school. A lot of them are about the American Civil Rights movement, and this is pure ideology. In another world, maybe children come out. Maybe children of immigrants go to school, learn who Athelstan was.
They learn who John Dee was. Right?
Learn who John Dee was, and I think
14 weeks of the year 7 curriculum is just John Dee
partly
studies.
in our cheeks at this point, but it's important to the cohesion of groups that there are stories in common, and we've basically chosen not really to do this beyond Henry VIII. That's the kind of culture that I think we should be preserving. If we're going to build these developments, name them after Arthurian characters, that kind of thing. All this stuff that brings our countries together makes it distinct.
Yeah.
This is all important to the body politic and to people flourishing and thriving in a coherent group.
But I think the synthesis there of these points is that the fruits of that
Love
culture.
the synthesizer.
Yeah. I do. the fruits of that culture, right?
Man reads one page of Hegel.
The fruits of that culture, which has been, dominant in Britain for, several centuries. You can argue exactly when it becomes kind of reified as the culture. But let's say sort of 1600 to 1900 for the sake of argument, where there's a very strong sense of that particular kind of culture. That's the same culture which I think people associate now with a lack of economic opportunity, Britain's decline in the world. It's the sort of myth of the lions led by donkeys. There was a clear reaction against that culture. And I don't agree with many of its moral assessments, but I think economic fruits are quite true. And you can see to some extent why someone rationally coming to Britain or, being born in Britain and growing up in that culture sees in a sense more dynamism and more opportunity in cultural forms which reject that history. And I think the task really is to find a way to deliver something from that culture which reawakens people to its possibilities. And to that point, I think that basically means building on the Greenbelt. Right, you have to, because there's a costly signalling element, right?
Yeah.
It's to sort of say, yes, the Greenbelt's a huge part of our culture. It's been very important, but really a culture dies without its youth and without its opportunity. And so now we will turn this Greenbelt into a new and more exciting form of its past self. And, we can preserve some prettiness. I absolutely don't think we should be building sort of Dubai skyscrapers, but there should be something there which gives people a reason to believe in it.
And if I may synthesize your synthesis,
yeah.
If it's not rude.
If
I may do a meta synthesis.
The meta synthesis, exactly, yeah.
I mean, you're basically, this is basically a sort of, what you're grasping toward is Anglo-futurism. It's like a fusion of aesthetics and technology that people can buy into.
Like your sailor comment, what's that?
Play the theme tune.
So I think Tom, just to add in a little bit, because I love the sound of my own voice. Like, maintaining opera now is a very costly and inefficient thing to do, because people do not attend the opera as a meaningful way of gathering, seeing each other in the way that they once did. Right? You read about. I can't remember when specifically, but it's the accounts of the Italian operas, and everyone is going to the opera once a week, specifically to hear their favorite arias. And these rubbish operas are written to show off the vocal performance of star sopranos.
Exactly.
And that clearly
they were the celebrities.
They
of
were
the
the
day,
celebrities.
And
exactly.
The aria is tied to their personality.
Exactly. And people were engaging in it far more than you like Flashman and Rider Haggard or whatever. And like these are forms that fitted in a time, and an attempt to recreate them, as Aeron said, is like a refusal to engage with
Oh no, of course, I'm not saying
our current present.
Make every kid in central London go to opera every weekend. That's obviously a retarded argument.
Well, you could,
Like,
though. You could, but it would be inefficient because you'd be fighting against vast economic forces that would, like, the popularity of, or like short attention spans or whatever, or like. But you could. I mean, you could
I think
do it.
The essence of weird, as Alex was saying, was stories that are passed on. So that's much more important than the vessel of the story. So it's maybe not even the case that there's a Percival or like Parsifal opera. It's like the actual Arthurian story that is the important thing. Like a 6 parts Arthurian thing. Like that would be like the modern interpretation.
Sure, but actually, the real question is, does Arthur have relevance? And like that is actually the real fight. Is if you're going to keep your powder dry.
Well, if you want a cohesive culture, then this stuff does have to have relevance. Like we need to be able to tell a story about ourselves as a people, like where we came from.
Yeah, but if we're going to go back to this thing of like you have to go with the flow, the narrative that has emerged and whether to what extent is like artificial or has been created. The fact is it exists is the modern birth of Britain in Windrush, right? Like the post-war modern Britain. And this is why I said about keeping your powder dry. If you have basically like 1 or 2 shots to go against the natural flow or the easy flow or just going with the economic direction, where are you going to use them? It's not clear, like, can you bend that Windrush
Well, you can
story?
say let's go with the flow, but the people who want to wash away everything that makes our culture distinct are not thinking that way.
I think
they are actively seeking to redefine history around the end of the Second World War, Windrush,
and you're
Tony
speaking
Blair.
something I was thinking about as you were talking, which we do see retellings of the Arthurian legend, we do see retellings of Shakespeare. All of that is still there. And it's often filtered through, people have been somewhat critical, say, of the work coming out of the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse at the Globe, various recent stagings of things like Hamlet, where, that contemporary ideology in some sense, the RNHS kind of global state, is shaping these stories in ways which speak to that moment. And there's clearly not a lack, in a sense, of engagement with that national story. But I think you speak to a sense that many people feel of vandalization now, and a sense that the true message of those things is being, really destroyed. Clearly stories are retold for every generation, but there does seem to be an instinctual sense that the way they're being retold now undermines the central point. And I wonder whether the reactionary thing to do is to return to the original telling, which can't possibly work because the original telling, was already outmoded, right? The Greek myths were not, told in the original form in kind of 16 and 1700. They were already being rewritten and updated. And to some extent, I think there's a lack of vitalism around what the story could be now, which carries those virtues that we think are important, and gives an answer to these quite bland, like to use a trite word, woke retellings of the classics.
Well, I suppose my argument is that we can't force kids to read Mallory in his entirety. We certainly shouldn't make them sit through every kind of Stormzy retelling of Hamlet using the word in it. That's just as bad in its own way. But this is why I say, get HBO to make a series of
HBO,
whatever HBO is.
The BBC.
But some collaborate. I said HBO BBC collab, right? So HBO just standing for some kind of televisual behemoth whose resources we can use to retell something in a modern form that has vivacity and resonance.
I mean, the Hollow Crown sort of series on the BBC must have been, about a decade ago now, right? Sort of went through many of Shakespeare's best history plays. And, it was casting Ben Whishaw, Tom Hiddleston, very current big name actors in lead roles. It was actually quite a straight retelling in many senses. I think, there were some casting decisions that, people might get particularly anal about in terms of, it's not quite accurate to that character. But overall, it was really sparked by Game of Thrones, right? There was clearly a market desire for this like retro medieval vibe. And they just went straight in and did the Shakespeare history plays with, I think, minimal gloss, just casting good actors. And that's, I think, still hugely popular, still does good numbers on streaming. So maybe it's speaking to something more like that, where we do see those things almost as the intellectual property of Britain to be invested in and retold.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to try and wrap this into a what does British culture in our vision look like going forward, it has to feel modern. It has to feel a fresh and genuinely new and exciting expression.
Yeah, it can't be boomer coded.
No,
and
exactly.
Anything that comes out of the BBC just feels like Boomer Broadcasting Corporation.
Well, weirdly about the BBC is you have state resources dedicated into something that is attempting to feel radical, but now is feeling more and more dated, right? And going back to that idea we had about consensus and it being very difficult to produce genuinely novel or fresh ideas out of a consensus is, I don't think it's going to come out of HBO or the BBC or whatever, because look at things like the Rings of Power, right? Which is when you get artistic production that comes out of committee, do you actually need?
Well, it's the wrong people.
No,
I think that's
it isn't.
probably
No, it
I
isn't.
think there's a version of the Rings of Power that is good.
It comes out of individuals.
Orthodox Randian take here.
It comes out of
But
individuals.
this is an industry that has been totally captured by a particular ideology that enshittifies everything it touches.
But no film benefits from people in committee looking over it and rubbing the rough edges off. I think the real
I'm not arguing in favour of committees.
No, but the real problem that we actually have is that you said you can't force everyone to read Mallory. When people haven't read enough Mallory or people haven't read enough, they don't have the background or the hinterland to even begin to appreciate or select good things. So even if someone came along and produced something good, in the same way that, Samo talked about people recasting their inability to produce swords as a good thing because spears are better. I read a thing about the writers of She-Hulk basically admitting that they didn't know how to do episodes. They couldn't do that really tight, set up a situation, present it, have an A and a B plot line, wrap it up by the end, and move on. They just couldn't do that because they hadn't had the training and learning of how to do that. And I think the problem that we've got now is even if someone were to produce a Hollow Crown or something of that ilk that felt fresh or was fresh to them, because you don't have a tight enough agreement on what everyone should have read and what looks good and what is good, it wouldn't be appreciated and people would scoff at it or people wouldn't watch it because there isn't enough agreement on what is important to see.
But this is the task of the artist, isn't it? I mean, I think sometimes this fractured story is overtold. In some sense, in the modern age, we have a better view of what everyone thinks, and we know where the areas of disagreement are and the sort of various tribes we have to unite. And for most of history, this wasn't true. And yet, we can look at an artist from 100, 200, 300 years ago and see that the story and message contained in there, even, let's say, going back to sort of ancient works, resonates throughout history and across a number of different contexts because it's genuinely great art.
Sure, but over Christmas, I watched 2 versions of Emma. The one with Gwyneth Paltrow as Emma and then one as Anya Taylor-Joy. And it's very striking how much more polished the latter one is, the more modern one. Like everything is perfectly glossy, everything is like beautifully manicured, and yet it feels like less. It feels a bit emptier. And I wonder whether you have a problem that people demand like higher production values. People expect a certain glossiness, and they, the Gwyneth Paltrow Emma looks like is meant for realism. That you have what looks like two women in old-fashioned dresses walking through the Surrey Hills. Like it looks so modern in some ways, as in they're wearing old-fashioned clothes, but it looks so grounded and so real. But people react against that they can't really, they don't want something that looks less nice. So you sort of got a catch-22 there of people demand high production values because otherwise they think, oh, it looks silly. So you can't get a real like avant-garde, cheap theatre or film production that cuts corners but expresses a message. So you have to go through, to Tom's case of, you have to have HBO or Amazon involved to provide the money. But if that much money is up for like on the line, it thus has to generate return.
I mean, it's almost like an explicit signaling that we're in the realm of fantasy, right? With that glossy production.
Yeah.
It's impossible to watch it and not realize this is a highly stylized, exaggerated take on something.
Yeah.
Whereas those older, and it's not just Emma, right? Like there's a certain generation of sort of period drama, film or TV series from kind of, I guess, the 80s, 90s-ish. The TV adaptation of Middlemarch, I think, is a great example of this. Which, it's filmed in the same way EastEnders is filmed, right? It's immediate, just sort of realism. And almost now that creates a distance for many people, where it's like, oh, this is old stuff. Whereas if it's in the realm of fantasy, it's I'm safe to now, project my aspirations onto this.
Well, I mean, look at Wuthering, the Emerald Pharrell, like Wuthering Heights. It must be the most extreme version of this, which is like almost like plot is almost.
What about Pride and Prejudice and Zombies?
I haven't seen it, but it sounds great.
I haven't seen it.
Well, I mean, Pride and Prejudice, the one with Colin Firth versus the one with Keira Knightley, right? Is again a classic example of that like shift, and Barry Lyndon as well. Like the way that the past is both like very weird and familiar at the same time is lost. It's just like as you said, right? It's made so glossy that it's fantasy.
Calum, how about one more clip from the year 2025? Maybe one of our most historic contributions of that year.
Tom, I suspect what you're about to play next casts you in a rather wonderful light. Would I be correct?
Take it away, Aeron.
So, Tom, as a man who has spent the last few weeks with his head in a freezer trying to simulate the conditions or the experiences of a future British Antarctic Territory colonist, what sort of things might a futuristic and patriotic British colony look like?
Okay, let me paint you a picture, Calum. Close your eyes and imagine the gently nodding pump jack of the Royal Antarctic oil fields. To their north, a busy new harbour straddled by the mighty granite figure of the Scott Colossus, populated by humanoid mining robots. And finally, the king inspecting the first gold coin to emerge from the Antarctic Mint, just before he visits a vast data centre that is cooled by the snow and supported against the Antarctic gales by cathedral-style flying buttresses.
It would be quite a notable event, because always the gold in the royal jewellery has always come from Wales, right? What a declaration of intent to take gold from Antarctica.
Well, we've all seen the recent Antarctica strategy from the FCDO, and perhaps partly because of our influence, they do make a bit more mention of sovereignty than they have previously. So if that's not victory, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for appearances. They obviously don't say Anglo-futurism and so on, but I think if you read between the lines, it's obvious who they're listening to.
No, we do have listeners to the FCDO. So I'm not claiming this is like
they'll be doing a
total Anglo-futurist victory.
They'll be doing a McCarthyist sort of
Anglo-futurists under the bed.
Yeah, exactly. We must root them out.
Yeah, Tom, you're revealing them. You need, if you're going to activate the agents, you need to give the line like, "The snows over the Avon are very beautiful in the springtime." And
the snows over Port Lockroy.
and all of a sudden, 30 29-year-olds called James activate in broom cupboards and sort of march out,
tearing off their Uniqlo shirts.
Exactly, and underneath it's 3-button tweed, ready,
insulated tweed, ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Ready for Antarctica.
Exactly, like that Simpsons episode where it's like, where the Russia flips over its sign at the UN, and then Lenin like punches his way out of his tomb, and the Kremlin's domes are converted to missile silos. That in a similar way, the Foreign Office, flips up, and Thunderbird 1 comes shooting out of it.
Yeah. So Tom, how do you feel about Antarctica now? I mean, that episode was what, back in, when was it? April?
That's February.
Okay, so it's nearly a year ago now. You have spent all of that year talking to women in bars about Antarctica. So
to a frosty reception.
No. I there was over summer. I think we said on the podcast, I was regaling this minxy brunette with the Antarctica argument, and then I got her number at the end of it.
Well, I was very struck by when you revealed the present that I gave you on Twitter, that there was at least one beautiful woman underneath asking when she would get her own model. So
she's a big Antarctica fan, actually. I think I know the one you're talking about. But yeah, have we said on the podcast what your present for me was? We had a joint 60th because our birthdays added up to 60.
Tom,
I would say the distribution was not entirely even, but we don't have to go any further than that. I've done a bit more of the legwork, as per.
Exactly, as a callow youth, I just swanned in.
With a Norwood 1.
What did I give you, Tom?
Well, as promised on this podcast, Calum got me, you kind of jokingly promising it on air.
I did.
And you did actually come up with the goods. And the goods were a 3D printed model of the Antarctic of Antarctica, with a cutaway of the British Antarctic Territory bedrock.
Yeah.
And it took 30 hours to make in your lab.
Well, I printed them.
And we've had people asking when they can have one. When is Matt Clifford getting his?
Matt Clifford's one. I haven't actually started printing yet. I need to put them all on. I've been locked at home doing Excel work, but I'll put it on, and I will send out to our loyal fans their models. Of course, Tom, it will be less spectacular than yours. Yours will remain prime, retain its primacy.
Well, we're going to have to mount it and put it up in the KT3 / our flat in South London.
Yeah, I'm not. I still need to also cut the acrylic base. So there are a few obstacles to be jumped, but you will have it. I'm thinking actually, Tom, rather than mounting it in the living room, you should mount it above your bed on the ceiling, in a sort of like those seedy hotels with mirrors on the ceiling that you can sort of gaze.
What are those for?
lay back and think of Antarctica.
You can gaze up at it, or actually potentially even worse, like in American Psycho, where he's got mirrors all around. So whatever position he's in, he can look over and like flex his muscles. You could have a sort of Antarctic ensign or a 3D model just at every single viewpoint. So at all points, you could sort of intellectual man's Viagra, so to speak.
Muscular Antarctic Anglo-futurism.
Exactly.
No, I look back on that episode and I think I stand by every single word.
Well, how in 2026, Tom, are you going to push the cause of British Antarctic exploration, colonization, and settlement?
Well, I'd like to. I mean, I certainly like to speak to people who know more than I do about Antarctica and about current modelling of the subsurface resources there. So this is an invitation. Like we want to talk to people who know about this stuff, and I have to figure out the steps between that and the armed conquest of the bits of Antarctica we don't already own.
I mean, the declinists and the doomers have been saying that you can't just break that international treaty, right?
Well, my argument it's actually been a very modest argument, which is that we should be ready for the modification of that treaty in 2048. And if we, and this goes back to our discussion of autonomy and being indispensable. If there's not some indispensable thing in Antarctica that we're doing, such as modelling the subsurface resources and hoarding that IP and offering it as a bargaining chip, then we are going to lose our claim.
Well, I think you're potentially, Tom, you might have even slipped into the tepid bath. Should we not actually, why listen to the treaty? Why not just go and start, pressing our claim now? Why should we?
Because we have obligations under international law.
How dare you mischaracterize my position in that manner, Aeron? No, I do. I don't think we have any force with which to back it up at the moment.
But I mean, I've just been reading a book called If Russia Wins, which imagines a Russian incursion into a limited incursion into Estonia, where they conquer a small Russian-speaking town. And the West basically blinks and moves frigates nearby to express its disapproval, but doesn't actually act, and thus it's a fait accompli. Is there not a sort of similar model where, at the moment the West is very much on the defensive, in that other countries, I think what the book describes as the axis of revisionists, have the initiative, where we sit and wait for people to do things. The Anglo-futurist thing to do, the bold thing to do, would be to engage in a little bit of brinksmanship ourselves and say, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to kick us out? Is the US going to send troops to remove its closest allies' scientific research mission? Where each of the researchers is a rather burly ex-soldier who has just decided to take up Antarctic surveying. Why not? Why not?
I think it actually is important that we are seen to keep our word internationally.
Perfidious Albion. We have a prestigious history.
I also think that we'd be overwhelmed quickly by anyone with a better navy than ours. I don't think we'd be able to sustain a military operation there.
You're right. We potentially don't. But again, that's a reason potentially to. It's a goal, right?
This is what I argue in my Palladian piece. We should be rebuilding our capacity to actually defend these resources in the event one day that we take control of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of death spiral, right? I mean, this came up around the Chagos dispute as well. That one of the reasons people gave for giving up on it was because we simply would not be able to defend it. So it was all a bit of a fiction. A lot of that comes from the fact that we are giving up on those places.
To the bully who's asking for it, lest he take it off you later.
Yeah, well, it's that, but also the fact that we have given up on those places, and therefore we don't see, say, defence investment and building up the military as particularly important. And so it becomes self-fulfilling, right? I guess part of what you're saying there is it would be good to set defence of Antarctica as actually a national priority and a reason to do more with the military and build up the Navy again and build up the Arctic forces. I mean, British forces do a lot of training in Arctic environments. There's a sort of Marines are specialised for it. We are able to do it, but there's no real sense that it should be prioritised at the moment because there's not a clear purpose.
Well, we don't have a culture that embraces physical frontiers, and I think that's a terrible shame. I think lots of young men in particular would benefit from being able to take more risk in their careers and being able to go somewhere risky and make something of themselves. I don't know how we recreate that culture or create a new version of it, but it feels to me like something that would be very valuable for everyone.
I wonder whether actually the declining birth rates creates not quite a frontier, but there was a good tweet that I saw which made the argument that in times of high churn, we should recognise that often victory will be determined not by intelligence or capability, but by willingness to take risks. And there's very potentially a similar situation that happens as large parts of the world sort of start breaking down as complex systems aren't able to carry on functioning without the people to like man them. That is, it's a bizarre like internal frontier where towns kind of vanish because there's no one young there, and you don't really hear about them because slowly everyone's above 80 there, and they just die off. Like, it's a weird sort of internal frontier where places just vanish, and once again the insides of your country become foreign to you and unknown. Of course, conscripting a lot of people and sending them to fight in Antarctica is also another option.
I mean, there's the. I think this has slightly gone under the radar, but obviously Rishi Sunak had his ill-fated policy of sort of military gap years, right, going into the last election, and this has come back.
Yeah.
It's much reduced now. It's silly numbers. I think sort of double digits to start with, but there is maybe a sense that. In some sense, the older purpose of the military as it's a good place to go for a lot of jobs and to sort of get skills early on in life, and you sort of, maybe do your 5 years and then get out and go and do something else, might be coming back. But clearly the funding constraints on the army and the very long trend towards seeing the role of the British Army and increasingly the Navy and the RAF as providing specialist professional services to other militaries around the world. There's a lot of humour in the military around our role in Ukraine, where we were going to train them. And it's rapidly become the case that the Ukrainians are training us because they're actually doing the fighting. And they, learned a lot faster about, the realities of modern, semi-automated warfare than anything we knew. We clearly need to be doing more and acting more in the world militarily to basically sustain any ability to defend our interests when the time comes, and to have the option to do something like, use Antarctica for something else, or defend the Chagos, for example.
We're thinking of the birth rate, Aeron. So you've got one son in the oven.
Yes.
Young Cecil. If he ends up being, I don't know, one or two, perhaps he'd be less willing to send him on a military gap year in Antarctica than if he were part of a mighty strapping brood of 5 burly boys.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, right? And that idea that perhaps military service came from a time when we had greater surplus in some sense, and also aspects of
and also inheritance would go to the eldest son.
Yeah,
and so you most families would have multiple boys, some of whom, perhaps most of whom, were not lined up to inherit anything. And so they would actually have to go to the military or something like that to make something of themselves.
Yeah, indeed. And it goes back to this point that sort of without continuity of culture and something invested, the ability to, be vitalistic and to take risks within that culture is much reduced. Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, I guess morally, I obviously would think sort of, abstractly, yes, of course, it's good that you're going to Antarctica and it's good that you're, doing something for the country. It's very important. I think it would be silly to say that you wouldn't feel some amount of fear.
We'll be so proud when you bring down your first Argentinian helicopter.
Yeah, indeed. Launch a depth charge on your first whale. Yeah, I mean, but that's also our shielding from war, right? We don't perceive much risk in everyday life anymore. There was the recent fire at the ski chalet in Switzerland, and there's a astounding clip of people inside the bar as the fire is spreading, just standing there filming it. I think quite clearly because they don't really perceive that bad things happen anymore. They're watching this, incredible blaze rip through the building, and they're thinking, hey, this is funny, it's fire, but I'm obviously not going to die, like that doesn't happen anymore. And our calculus around war and armies generally has become like that, where, the still relatively small risk of dying in combat is seen as a huge risk compared to everyday life, where we must be perfectly safe. But if we are in a world where military conflict is more common and great power competition becomes a bigger part of everyday life, then I don't think that calculus will be sustained. At some point, you have to realize there are things worth fighting for. We tell stories about war which are based on courage and maybe, less heroically just the acquisition of status and things like this. But ultimately, the story there is about something existential, whether it's the Napoleonic Wars, the First World War, the Second World War. People were going in broad part because there was a belief that your safety was not guaranteed at home if something wasn't done.
There's a line in the Julian Jackson biography of Charles de Gaulle about how because he came from a royalist Catholic family who had kind of abandoned the idea after Napoleon III had died, abandoned the idea that you were going to get or the legitimate pretender was going to come back, because he refused to come back if the tricolor was maintained. But a lot of the people in this family went and joined the army because it was a way that you could serve France without necessarily contaminating yourself by participating in sort of the Republic. That the army was a remnant of the old France. And I think you're right about that risk, that people are horrified by it. I think it will take a lot more for people to accept that different calculus. And actually, the thing that might do it are things like superbugs and antibiotic resistance, actually far more so than like danger, because clearly, as we've seen in Ukraine and Russia, like populations just have a different tolerance for death before they give up. And the Russian stoicism in the face of horrific casualties, you see mothers sending son after son off to fight, is just I don't think is something you can get back. That feels like very clearly a one-way street. Which, raises the question: could we even fight? Like, in the Falklands, right? There were was it HMS Sheffield or HMS Galahad got hit by an Exocet missile. Sheffield, and then went down, and there was a huge outcry about this. Like, it's difficult to fight a war if you can't lose any troops.
Yeah. The number of casualties there obviously sort of dwindles in comparison to any random day in any of the two world wars, barely half a century earlier. But Thatcher was on television sort of doing rounds, almost crying, talking about how sorry she was for the loss of those boys, and sort of personally wrote to the families of each one. So it's been a very quick move away from that sense that we can lose a lot of people in the sort of striving for the greater good. I think it's interesting. You could tell stories about, say, automated warfare and robotics, where this idea of personal risk is maybe less relevant, right? And perhaps the goal should be to realize that we are never going back to that time where we're willing to, expend human lives on military aims.
But then prepare to lose to people who are, right? Like, tanks can't hold ground. You have to have infantry. It's a question for the two of you.
We're in the past, the final few decades probably of there being human infantry, apart from there's
I'm not sure if that's true. I think give an Optimus an assault rifle in a few years when it's better.
I think
if you're going to be very cynical about it, what's cheaper to produce, a machine like a droid or a human? The easy thing about humans is, to go back to our conversation about organelles,
renewable.
You only have to feed them oxygen and biscuits.
No. I think historically we're trending towards robots being cheaper.
There's maybe the strategic point, though, right? So infamously, the India-China conflict that's ongoing, because of the very great risk of escalation there, because of the very powerful weapons they have, it's very important they mostly fight with sticks and stones, right? And so there's this weird niche where that kind of very archaic conflict has to take place.
It's actually nuclear realpolitik. That's why we're throwing these stones.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Neo Bushido.
Yeah. You can sort of imagine that, right? Like if we, in extremis, the kind of killer drone swarm is genocidal technology immediately, right? Sort of if you have, a sort of effectively infinite number of these in production as your sort of industrial behemoth, you very much don't want to escalate to that point where your two drone swarms are fighting, and if, one line breaks, that's it, the entire country is dead, right? You want to stay below that. And so that may still be a place where, human conflict has to remain in play.
Yeah, but then you get to a sort of permanent anti-insurgency style world, right? Where if the dominant power is basically like limits itself via either technological or for technological or for moral reasons, and doesn't do the sort of in extremis act of destroying an insurgency, you get basically permanent war. And there's that what you described there is talked about, Tom, in that book that we've both read, the Hyperion Cantos. And now I mentioned that.
Incredible book.
Incredible book. And the general in that talks about the ideas of Neo Bushido, where there was limited warfare between groups, and it was sort of formalized and strict. But that only works as long as you're amongst like people who agree to the rules. Like, if you watch the bridge over the River Kwai, the horror of the British soldiers when like the Japanese like lop off hands and make officers work, it all falls apart when things get existential. Like, to me, this feels like a very sort of uni-party position, that war is a game until everything falls apart, and that you meet a genuine enemy.
I'm sure there've been many decadent societies in the past that have had to become reacquainted with the horrible reality of war.
Or they die.
Yeah, or they die. But I think there'll be something in our genetic code that will make us kind of wake up and become tougher rather than face obliteration.
I do sometimes think, the liberal moment, the uni-party moment of the 20th century into the 21st has obviously led to, and it's there in the Technological Republic with Alex Karp, this renewed valorization of military might. And I think it's important in that to not forget the ambitions and aims of that liberal moment, which were the aims of kind of good statecraft, for much of history, which is that war is a last resort, right? And the actual aims of the state should always be to avoid it. America, in some sense, does quite well at this by being so powerful. It means it doesn't have to fight a lot of conflicts unless it really wants to, and when it can do so in quite limited and surgical ways, with some notable exceptions. This story that we tell at the moment of peace and relying on our allies and being able to, draw on the peace dividend has clearly led to, if not a particularly concrete and reified idea, a vague sense that we are at risk, and that a powerful enemy, which we increasingly see around the world, and someone with an interest in disrupting us, could do so with impunity. And at the moment, I think it's experienced largely as a loss of agency, the sense that, there are Chinese spies who are manipulating our government, or, the Chagos issue is because we weren't able to, exude the right level of power, and we have to tell this story about, it's soft power, it's good actually. All of this is leading to a sense that it would only take a small push now to actually do something quite serious militarily. This is felt across Europe. And I think if we want to avoid that, and thinking very carefully about the real consequences of that in terms of capture, death, things that are way outside of living memory now for a lot of people. We very clearly have to think more about the kind of statecraft we do to protect ourselves, and whether that's building up the military or finding stronger alliances or finding non-military ways, as has been discussed in the point about supply chains and choke points we can occupy. This has to be our core national priority, because nothing else that we want and the sort of brilliant, abundant futures that we can imagine can happen without the ability to defend it.
What would it take you to sign up, Tom?
To sign up?
Yeah. What would be the situation that would spur you into joining the assault infantry?
If there was some existential war for us, then of course I'd do it.
What counts as existential?
Maybe we're facing conquest.
It's quite a high bar.
Yeah, it is a high bar, but I'm 33. I think my place is not
You're
necessarily
over the hill.
my place is not necessarily at the front. If it were a sort of special forces mission to
To write some good copy.
to Buenos Aires to nip their Antarctic operations in the butt, then I'd consider it. I don't know. Well, as you age, you acquire lots of kind of obligations that make it harder for you to just drop everything and join the army. I suppose we shouldn't be too picky about the British state that we're trying to defend. Even though we might question the current British state in some ways. So I don't know if we went back, if we tried to do another Afghanistan war, I'm not sure that I would be first in line to join.
It's an interesting point you make there about if it was existential. I think probably a lot of people would share that.
Well, I mean, famously, there are those videos that go around of, from TikTok or whatever, of like, young roadmen being interviewed, like, would you fight for this country? And I'm sure that they select the kind of sensational ones. But all these young men are going, obviously not. Like, I'm getting straight out of here. Like, I'm from Jamaica, really.
Yeah, Tom, the implicit message of that is, yes, but if you asked a true Briton, he would say yes immediately. Which the evidence here is that actually,
would you fight for your country? I suppose that's the question, and I think it's like couched in such vague terms that it wouldn't make sense. But I think these. The way that these clips are presented, like these youngsters are saying, no, I wouldn't in any circumstances. I wouldn't want to take a risk. Like I would just go, and some would say like I would just go to Jamaica or something. But what would I do? Go to Canada?
Split up.
If it's an existential war, then like, the three of us should be signing up.
What defines existential?
Yeah,
conquest. Do they have to be sort of in France, preparing to land?
Bit late then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
suppose
suppose
it's
a fine line.
This is how you get to sort of Iraq and Afghanistan, right? It's saying, well, Saddam is a threat, and like this particular chain of events could eventually lead to.
That's
that's the British interest story, right?
Yes, it's an interest story. I think there was probably even at the time, it didn't strike everyone as plausible, right? That Saddam had. WMDs.
No, that's not true.
I believe
trained
everything Tony Blair told me,
and
I
actually,
still do.
And Blair, I think himself also believed it, right? I mean, obviously he's not going to say
does.
that. Yeah, he still does. But there was clearly there was. It's not just total fraud.
No. It wasn't right. I mean, lots. It was the commonly held that Saddam had WMDs, sure. But I would also say that Iraq would not have been the only country somewhat hostile to us to have had WMDs in history, and we did not go to war with them.
You're right. That's why we should also destroy India.
Yeah, and Russia, Pakistan, all the rest.
Real neoconservatism has never been tried.
Yeah, exactly. The true benefits of a martial culture come about when every other country on the planet is a steaming slag heap, and then your people can rediscover a frontier.
So what else do we want to see in 2026 apart from a vivifying land war that we can all get involved in?
I mean, I'm happy with that. That's me sorted.
A land war in Europe. That's what that's what I want for Christmas.
It's starting the land wars in the Middle East that always send you the wrong way, right? It's famously a bad idea.
The problem with the Middle East is the land wars are no fun.
No, I think they're probably great fun if you're sort of Pashtun tribesmen shooting. I read too much blasphemy.
I mean, by all
with your
accounts.
sniper rifle.
My Jezzail, my huge grit Jezzail based on an antiquated brown Bess that I have modified extensively with scrimshaw on the barrel that can fire around.
I mean, and
if it doesn't work out, you get your 80 versions at the end. It's a win-win.
the real tragedy of Iraq and Afghanistan, of course, is the continued infliction of Rory Stewart on our political culture.
No, that forms a key part of our demoralization campaign.
It's the great blowback, right? You sort of go into Afghanistan, you come out, you think it's all fine, but now you have the radicals at home.
Making everyone skeptical of posh podcasting men.
Yeah.
We're not all the same,
I will ask, given you didn't really have an answer to what would make you fight other than, existential threat, suppose a particular unnamed minx of good breeding, good education.
I'm fighting. I'm fighting.
Impeccable pedigree.
Yeah, she sort of, said that she'd have a bit of a thing for you in uniform.
Do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Do it in a heartbeat. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that's the real lesson.
The true minx forward or minx driven recruitment has never been tried. but that's the real bottleneck and vertical that we need to be optimizing for then, because the bisexual posh Palestine supporting middle class woman, she's not going to be marrying you if you're in uniform. We need to capture this vertical and convert these ladies into white feather handing out radicals.
Sort of scale the GB News contingent.
Well, although to be fair, apparently the suffragettes, and I say that deliberately, suffragettes as in the sort of the radical ones compared to the suffragists, they apparently were some of the biggest handers out of white white feathers. So actually, maybe there's a model there where if we could just have enough people gathering, or like I don't know, Russians gathered in Calais, maybe they would turn and become real partisans for the cause.
They would become the upholders of the new social moral order.
Yeah, exactly. The true longhouse has never been tried.
Yeah. Well, I guess surely one of your resolutions for next year is to get married.
Get married. Watch and go 0 to marriage within 12 months.
Yeah.
Skill issue, mate.
Probably, could probably have one child out of the oven by Christmas.
Yeah,
out of the oven. Wow, you.
Well, on that a very aggressive timeline.
No, come on. You could have an October wedding.
In the southern hemisphere.
Yeah. Antarctica, I've heard, is lovely. It's lovely in October.
No, I'm not sure the in-laws would really appreciate having to take a sort of biplane out of the Falklands.
Destination wedding. Oh, ridiculous tosh.
£10,000 rounds trip.
Do you think you could get a sort of all-inclusive deal with, I don't know, the Chinese Supply Corps?
I think they'd be delighted to have us down there. What are your resolutions? I think I want to have another reading competition with you, and I want to beat you again. I think that's mine.
Not been ratified
Men
yet.
used to go to war, now they have reading competitions.
It has not yet been formally ratified. The fat lady with the tape measure has not yet sung. I think I would like to have more dinner parties. And I had when Tom, you and I met, I was actually, well, 3 of us met. Although I think Tom and I made a stronger impression on each other that first evening. I was deep in every decision I made was filtered through a lens of, is this a pro-social thing to do? Am I causing more socializing to happen? Am I increasing the chances of my friends getting married? I've somewhat fallen off that wagon, so I'd like to chase after the caboose.
This sort of sounds like the autist version of sort of, remembering that you're breathing. I'm socializing right now. It's very good.
Well, luckily, I don't think I'm quite autistic enough for that to hinder my effectiveness. In fact, I actually was a very awkward and quiet child until I learnt the benefits of turning up at a party, having 3 or 4 cans, and then becoming the life and soul of the party, until I then realised you actually don't have to have the 3 or 4 cans, you can just pretend. I've described, alcoholism as a good...
The origin story of the garrulous monster we know today.
I would encourage people to just consider 3 or 4 beers. The answer to any social situation.
Yeah, I think more hosting a good resolution. I'd like to reread Mallory since I've been banging on about him.
We can read Mallory. I want to read The Fairy Queen.
Oh, it's awful. It's, well, I don't know. I was forced to read it as an English literature undergraduate when I was, I think, 19. And this is my London 2012 battery swapping summer. And so I was on shifts that occupied horrendous hours of the day, like furiously trying to read 100 pages of The Fairy Queen, like on every night shift. And I must confess that I found it absolutely dire. It's very stylized and ponderous. Perhaps I get more out of it now, as I think was probably true of most of the things that I was reading back then as a teenager.
At the time, you were thinking, what use is this in, Danny Boyle's New Britain, right? It's...
No, but then I become a nationalist influencer, like
Sure.
10 plus years later, a little more than 10 years later, actually.
It got in there somewhere in the subconscious.
There was a guy who, I can't remember who he was, but he was talking about being at university during kind of early Blair, and how all the real Blairites would say, like, reading is elitist. And Tom, that this potentially impacted you on the tail end. So you need to undo some cultural programming.
Well, reading sort of, I mean, there's a cognitive elitism, I would say, to being able to
read.
Literally being able to read these days, yeah. Yeah, not everyone can do it. Like, not everyone can read a book of considerable length.
Yeah. Actually, no. I do have a resolution. I'm going to finish all of Dickens.
All of Dickens.
So I'm gonna. Yeah. I think I'm probably about halfway through.
Halfway through the entire Dickens corpus.
Yeah.
So, but this is like 20 plus novels of extraordinary length.
Yeah.
And you want to read like 10 of them in a year.
Yeah, I think that's doable.
I mean, good luck.
I think I've read some of the longest ones already, like Our Mutual Friend.
You read Bleak House last year.
I read Bleak House last year.
Are you sure you're not reading the sort of like BBC Pigeon editions of Dickens?
What else? There was one more thing I wanted to.
I mean, surely the company, right? The Grand Automated Lab.
Oh yeah, the Grand Automated Lab. The Grand Automated Lab. I'm going to raise a lot of money this year. I'm also actually going to teach a whole load of people, including hopefully my two peers and friends here.
Yes.
How to build drones.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
on the topic of
this is why we're not going to the front line, because we're learning how to make the drones.
This is actually kind of my strategy. Is I think if I can convince a whole load of my humanities bluffers friends to spend a couple of months with me learning how to flash firmware into one-directional effectors, as they're called euphemistically in the trade, then maybe actually my post, I don't know, Chinese invasion of 2032, like dinner parties will be less lonely because the fewer of you will have been sent to the front lines.
Oh, when we also going to do muscular Anglo-futurism? I think we meant to do it last year and we didn't quite get around to it. But
didn't
muscular
quite.
Anglo-futurists are just putting on muscle while being Anglo-futurists. So the other part of our contest was who'd put on the most kilos of muscle. I'm not sure.
I will say, looking at both of you, I think it might be a draw.
Measured not in kilos but in grams.
No, but this time we mean it.
This time we mean it.
So all the kind of blue-eyed home counties girls who listen to the podcast and the single should be aware that
only one of us is available. So get them while stocks last. Anglo-futurists running out. This one slightly dented, few previous owners.
Has promised to put on 6 kilos of muscle.
Yes, exactly. We'll guarantee
it's coming in the post.
if
your money back.
If there's an October wedding, he will brush up and
1 year warranty.
A friend of the show was talking to me about the growth in experimental peptides recently, right? Sort of colloquially called Chinese peptides. But many of these, of course, are geared towards muscle growth. Do you see yourself, having a future? I know some have also been promoted for curing baldness.
I'm very happy with the Norwood 2 that I have.
Yeah.
It connotes wisdom and intelligence and maturity.
Tom, I think to really commit to this, you should do like what the Chinese mandarins used to do, and they shave like the front of their head in order to get a bigger forehead, because the forehead was
this is what you should do.
Forehead was
with your callow, boyish Norwood one.
I'd have a really
barely an inch between your eyebrows and your hairline.
I could have a long pigtail going down the back of my head. It was what they also did in that book, Mortal Engines.
Mortal Engines was so good.
Fabulous.
Mortal Engines. They would also.
That's with the cities.
Exactly.
They were getting actually incredibly Anglo-futurist.
Yeah.
They were getting very Chinese.
I think I had an argument with Philip Reeve on Twitter, but realizing who he was, I immediately said, "Mr. Reeve." I did not know who I was speaking to.
Was it that Anglo-futurist? I remember they were talking about like once there was a time when resources had been so prosperous they'd been able to like spin off daughter towns like Coventry, and now everything was a bit sparse.
It became London-centric. Tom Forth would hate. Tom Forth would hate Mortal Engines.
Tom, take this as an idea. It's not a tram in Leeds. It's Leeds on a tram.
Leeds is the tram. he's reading through it, being like, "Where is Leeds? Where is Leeds? Where is Leeds?" and then he realizes with horror that Leeds was in fact eaten by Munich before the book started.
They weren't able to move fast enough and got trapped in a valley in the Pennines and got some stuck.
Gobbled up. That's what happens to your Mortal Engines.
Surely, being at a very Chinese time in your life, which many of us have experienced, surely this is out for 2026. I think it's time we all stopped being Chinese.
Oh, I think being very Chinese with it is only just beginning.
No, Chinese peptides in, Sino-futurism in.
Wait, but these were in last year, Tom.
Made in China out.
I'm looking forward to the Made in China, like Made in Chelsea reboot, where we get the dripped out Asian babes in London at various second-rate universities studying psychology and fake engineering. And it's like Labubu Central, who's got the rarest one, where's the best place to get boba? Let's bring some Chinese.
The ABGs hitting the streets of Chelsea like crack.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be. But it wouldn't
What's
be
an
ABG.
ABG?
Asian baby girl.
Thank you, Callum.
But I think that's a very.
Do you need a further definition?
I think I'm good. I get it.
I think that's a very Californian American
Where are
version.
the HCBGs? Home counties baby girls.
ABG's out.
HCBG's in. Ripped out HCBG.
The dripped out home counties babes.
Wearing her Catkiston, her barber.
Yeah, I didn't know Barber did Labubus.
comes with poacher pockets that you can put game in. It's Louis Vuitton, but with cartridge pockets.
Yeah, Louis Vuitton Arga.
You know how we were talking about whether we could create new forms of culture that would really speak to the people? it's Dubai chocolate, but from Hull.
I think it's the electric Arga. My mother's got one. It's amazing.
The electric Arga. Would you refer to your mother as a West Country baby girl?
in her prime, I think.
My mother is still in her prime. How dare you?
Very good, very good.
So the California stereotype is that the ABG likes Valorant, playing Valorant, going to raves, and having boba. Can we just do a bit of some ontology? What is the home county's baby girl?
The HCBG.
Yeah.
Well,
Like what are the defining? As Anglo-futurism is. Georgian townhouses on the moon.
She drinks Whispering Angel.
Yeah, and chicken wine.
Yeah, No. Chicken wine is a bit in for a dig.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Maybe HCBG does drink chicken wine on occasion with the girls.
I mean, the core feature of the ABG in sort of American tech culture is their will to power, right? Like it's argued that they're a core part of the startup ecosystem, because they select only the best startup founders to date, right? And they sort of encourage them to be, the Ubermensch. And so the home county's baby girl needs to do something like this.
I think in a less flattering way, I've heard them described as the truffle pigs for big pre-seeds.
This is ABGs. Yeah.
I
would never refer to
Is
someone
Jessie your purported girlfriend an HCBG?
She's from Kent.
She is an HCBG.
No,
very well evaded question.
She's from Kent.
She's from Kent.
So in fact, I would refer to her. I think Kent has its own important contribution, and maybe an H&H baby girl, a Hengst and Horser baby girl. A lover of chicken wine.
Yeah.
An enjoyer of attending heaven with, a noted fag hag.
Heaven. Wait, is that where she met you? Heaven.
She converted me. I was with all the boys.
Who's that garrulous dyke in the corner?
I have been compared to Carol Ann Duffy in the past for my hairstyle. So in a sort of parlier style way, I was seeking out the Apollonian hunks, and she saved me. She's sort of in the Dionysian call. Pulled me from the straight line, hard edge of the boys, and
she found him on Hinge.
Very, very the will to power there.
Hard cutting from the conversation about would you serve in the military to this, we're just
Aeron, what are your resolutions?
My resolutions. Yeah, I mean,
get your son out of the way.
Get
onto new things.
Out of the way. Yeah, I was saying earlier, of course. So I'm a big fan of sort of forecasting outfits, and they're very specific predictions. And there's a forecasting outfit recently who has made a prediction. I think they put a sort of 80% probability on the emergence of a child prodigy who would have sort of heretofore unforeseen powers, way beyond any other child prodigy, in the next 20 years. And the thing they did, which was excellent, was they listed the specific criteria, of course, for this prediction to be resolved. So we have a very concise definition of what it would take to raise this wonderful child prodigy. And so
open to reward hacking.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like I'm looking at it and I'm seeing the sort of speaks 4 or 5 languages.
This is like the AI model evals thing where they're just hitting the benchmark.
Exactly, yeah. It's like Grandmaster Chess ranking by 18. A few like a Math Olympiad
medal. He won't be able to tie his shoelaces.
It's not considered in the evals.
He'll be passing like every meter benchmark, but he won't be able to fry an egg.
Yeah, well, in that sense, he might, be much like his father. So
Very aristocratic. Very
Yeah.
aristocratic not being able to fry an egg. My great grandmother, when all the staff went off to war, she didn't know how to boil an egg. She raised I think she was 4, 5 boys. She had to learn very quickly.
Humiliating for the family that now you're quite an accomplished chef.
Yeah, I mean, this is the trauma of the downwardly mobile.
Yeah.
But Aeron, I think the question that Tom and I have is, what roles do you see us playing in your son's life? What aristocratic tuition, and what are the skills that we have that you feel we could impart to your son?
Your sort would be morality tales, right? Like this is the sort of example of what not to do, what not to follow.
What, like Pilgrim's Progress kind of thing, like Mr. Bumptious Talker and and Mr. Garrulous Grouser.
Yeah, sort of a living Hogarth etching. I think that'll be fine. But no, aside from the very important business of raising the son who will pull the sword from the stone, I think my resolution for the year is to be a little bit more serious and directed about all this political regime change. I am a long-term fan of Dominic Cummings before it was cool. A lot of you,
he's actually read some of the articles.
Yeah, exactly. I've been there since a DC in education. And the man has done great things, I think, for British politics and thinking about how Britain can be great in the world. And a decent education, I mean, it has all the ideas there. We talked about this idea of Britain as a school for the world. That's there in that 2012 essay, right? Very well worked out. In some ways, better worked out than how he'll present it today. But I think honestly, he's past it, and I think that right now there is a requirement for different sorts of people to come forwards and actually do something about the situation we find ourselves in, instead of pinning hopes on maybe Keir Starmer might, finally hit it out the park, or, I don't know, reform will come in and everything will be good again. I don't really know what that looks like yet, but I'm sort of setting
But it has to be someone who's been inside the system to understand. No?
Maybe.
No?
Maybe.
And this is an incredibly radical sort of burn it all to the ground approach.
I don't think it's that. I just think that the system isn't that complex, right? Like, to the extent there is complexity in the system of government, it should be got rid of, and it's, not really central to the function. We've heard this from guests. I mean, the recent Lovelace Labs episode, right? A lot of the things that got done there were by going, oh, well, the process, you just ignore that. They're having silly meetings. You can just do something here in quite an obvious way and just make a thing happen. I think we forget that sometimes in this portrayal, which Cummings has started leaning into as a sort of, new Peter Hitchens figure of, there's all these groups that you have to appease and all these things you have to unpick. And there certainly will be some of that. But there are remarkable returns to just doing things in the world and, basically breathing down the neck of your juniors or really pushing forward on a specific idea such that it becomes undeniable. And ultimately systems like that adapt to change in the world once it happens. There was no regulatory process in the UK which delivered NVIDIA being, a global company, right? It simply happened to us. And we've become far too used to things happening to us. And yeah, I think for my 2026, I am going to experiment more with basically just perturbing the system and seeing what happens.
Tom and I, you and I have experience of having Lefebvre breathing down our necks, don't we? We've experienced the oversight of the man. So the system won't know what hit it, So here's our prediction: Cummings out, 2026. Lefebvre in.
Yes, well, I hope I keep my hair. I would hate.
How's your hairline?
Oh, it's fine. It's great.
Let's see it.
Yeah,
He's got a fringe coming forward.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, it's respectable Norwood 2.
What do you mean?
That's
not a Norwood 2.
It's a Norwood 1.5.
You were calling yourself a Norwood 1 earlier.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't. It's a Norwood 2.
Are you going to call him Calum? You're going to call him...
Show us your temples.
We're all good. Yeah.
Norwood 1.5.
This is great radio.
Norwood 1.5.
You're going to
Yeah.
call him Callow like you did me.
Calum. It works perfectly.
Yeah, but no, I think more prosaically, we have a very clear sort of path towards the future at the moment, right? And there's this sort of process of hyperstition happening, right, where there is an obvious future in the near horizon of mass automation, widespread artificial intelligence, and technological acceleration. And this is coming back to us now and should be shaping many of our decisions. There is a tech tree, if you like, of cheap energy, which gets you the ability to have lots of compute and lots of manufacturing capacity. And using this, you can build out your industrial base. And we should be thinking about the place where I think most wealth in the world will come from in the near future, which is space. And as far as I'm concerned, Britain should be doing absolutely everything it can to get to space as the new frontier. You know, we talked about the frontiers throughout this episode. We're very good at that frontier thing. And it's a place where there's still a lot to play for. And it's also not clear that the natural advantages of the US and China really matter that much if you can be first out into space building your factories and manufacturing there. There was the recent news story about the space furnace that Britain sent up.
1,000 degrees Celsius in
Yeah.
space.
Fantastic.
And the heat shield on the way back.
Exactly.
It's called Pridwen, named after King Arthur's shield.
Indeed. And I love this, and I'm super heartened anytime I see something like this, because our journey to being a great power in the past came from the constraints of the island, right? We had to build out a navy. We had resource constraints then, and we were able to overcome them by going into the frontier. Obviously, the world has changed since then, but there is a frontier, unimaginably larger than the one we conquered before. And at the moment, no one is really laying claim to it. And I'm very hopeful for the growth of the space industry in Britain, but it requires the energy problem to be solved and the manufacturing problem to be solved to really take off.
There's an interesting point there, which is as more mass becomes available or like accessible in space compared to that on Earth, the relevance of the size of your country on Earth will actually diminish in importance. You know, the line about everyone's the same height when they're lying down. If you can get out there, that the material like volume that you can just start using starts like making irrelevant your
Completely.
starting point.
Yeah.
It becomes it's what becomes relevant is the time, like how the initial value problem takes as a function only the starting time point rather than the starting size of the country.
Yeah, indeed. And that's sort of the point, right? That we, I think, right now are underpricing just how fast takeoff in all of these domains will be and how much of an extraordinary lead you will be able to create if you can get out there first.
So how would we do this? I mean, you're still working on Palander.
Yeah, I'm working on Palander because I believe like the most proximate problem at the moment in Britain is that there isn't enough coordination and there is still an attachment to what you might call a corporatism in Britain. A lot of the coordination around problems comes through slow, quite archaic firms, which often act against the interests of their best employees and their stated aims. And I think we should be experimenting with new kinds of coordination to achieve the things we want, because so many of people in the country want broadly the same things and could be pooling talents and creating companies, organizations, non-profits, whatever you like, working towards solving a lot of the smaller issues in the tech tree that can just get us to that takeoff point. I think, unironically, if we can get to the point where we're able to start asteroid mining, start to control more of space, and again have more of these supply chain choke points that we've talked about, we can just start compounding those gains. I think Britain is very, very well placed to do it, and unlike the US and China, which are slightly locked into, a war, basically, right? They are going to be looking at each other. It's not going to go well, really, for either of them. I don't think there'll be a clear victor. It's just going to tie them up. Britain can hopefully make use of its slightly edge status, as we did throughout, the sort of 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, where there's all these land wars happening in Europe, and everyone's very tied up in all of that competition, and we're just over on the side getting on with the Industrial Revolution.
I mean, the wars of religion, right?
Yeah.
That ravaged Central Europe.
Yeah.
And we are just untouched by them.
Exactly.
Unbelievably, promising opportunity.
Yeah. And I do think we're in a similar sort of situation where we've kind of passed into irrelevance, and that's actually quite a good thing. We can focus on ourselves, 2026, self-care. But it's very true, and I'm hugely optimistic about it. But we just have to get serious around that coordination point and ensuring that there is a sense of direction and purpose to this thing. Because I really do believe Britain should be the wealthiest country in the galaxy.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, listeners, you've heard it. Go forth and start a rocket company
And multiply.
and multiply. Yeah. So your resolution, listeners, go and do all that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Tough luck. You're not on the podcast, so you don't get it. We'll tell you what the resolution
Yeah, we've
is.
got to tell people what to do. They're going to execute on it and build the space habitats and have 7 Anglo-futurist children each.
Please.
The ordeal of civility means that we have to put please at the
Yeah.
end. But
And for Tom's sake, you, the female listener, currently enjoying this podcast.
HCBG.
Yeah,
The HCBG listening to this.
he is available through DMs on X.
maybe Tom.
No, they don't use X.
Tom, maybe you should
yeah.
have like a Calendly link
God's sake.
in the show notes so
Well,
that people could book dates with you.
We'll get you on Palander.
And there could be a special category, a feature that allows people to book in dates with Tom O.
Unique on the platform.
Yeah.
It's like a huge banner ad.
You must be this fit to book. Yeah, you've got a special AI that
So exactly. You turn your face, front onto the camera, slightly to the left, slightly to the
age
right.
verification,
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Munter. Show me the pattern on your Emma Bridgewater in the cupboard. And
Show me your Pinterest. Do you have taste? The AI will evaluate it.
Yeah. Actually, it's just Tom scrolling.
How many houses made of bar stone are in your Pinterest?
Are you going to go away and apply to the Tyler Cowen call for aesthetics with sort of Cath Kidston abundance?
Bar stone abundance, Arga abundance.
Yeah.
Barber jacket abundance.
Arga abundance. Everything should be powered by fuel oil, spaceships that you sort of have to operate with mittens or big oven gloves.
The KC-3 has an Arga, right?
Somewhere in here.
Somewhere in here, yeah.
Right.
Somewhere in there. I think our choice of fuel varies from moment to moment. It's like the TARDIS, where there were depending on who we're talking.
Fusion-powered Arga, obviously.
Depending on who we're talking to, is either organic biomass, all the way through to fusion-powered. I don't know, hand dryers.
I'm suddenly thinking you're aiming too low with this applied Anglo-futurism thing. We should be sending an Arga into space, right, as the furnace.
It can get to as much as 120 degrees.
No, it'd be a souped-up Arga.
Souped up Arga, okay.
They should have a proper industrial furnace that has Arga branding. The same way there should be Henry Hoovers up there, as we've said, to get rid of all the space debris.
Yes, indeed.
And what's the domestic company? It was Yamaha that makes
everything.
Makes everything. Or aren't there other? There are other like Renault made tanks, but there are more kind of.
I mean, there's Hitachi, who famously, lots of home electronics, and made a back massager, which, good old conservative Mr. Hitachi found out a lot of women were misusing, and very, very nearly committed seppuku.
I mean,
over it.
I want to ask about the logistics, but maybe this is a family podcast.
Yeah. Wait, the logistics of the back massager.
Well,
how do we control the verticals? How do we control?
If it's a flat surface, what are they doing?
Have you never seen the Hitachi back massager?
No.
I think this is more revealing for you.
Yeah, Tom, that is it's like a jackhammery kind of thing.
Oh, I thought it was some sort of chair, but in fact it's
sort of wand shaped.
I see. Well, say no more.
Well, after that quick run through all topics, important and not so important, listeners, we leave you to separate one from the other. Tom, do you have anything to add before we send everyone off to go forth, conquer, multiply, and other complicated and involved actions of the year?
No, go to space, get rid of your Johnnies. That's what we ask.
It's not much.
Well, to make sure you do that rather than going to your Johnnies and getting rid of your space.
No. What we should say, 2025 was a great, fun year. Thank you, everyone, to listening and for sharing our episodes on social media,
Yes.
and for being part of this very enjoyable ride. We hope to keep throwing stuff your way in 2026
and being even less, funnier and less coherent.
Don't forget to subscribe on the Substack.
Oh, and share on social media.
And share on social media. We're going to get better at that in 2026, guys.
We're going to try and remind you more often. That's our resolution. Your resolution, listener, should be recommending the podcast more often.
Calum's just finished a book on New Labour and has just discovered the idea of message discipline. Which,
yeah, his grid.
Yeah, it's very positive.
Yeah, I actually love Alistair Campbell now. What the fuck? Like, honestly, Peter Mandelson, what a man. What a man. Genuinely.